Hello, I'm Rebecca Smithorn, cover conductor and lecturer with the National Philharmonic. Welcome to Composers in Crisis, where we talk about composers whose lives and art were not just disrupted, but actually transformed by times of global crisis. Today we're going to talk about Ludwig van Beethoven, who lived through massive political upheaval in Napoleon's Europe, including the bombing and occupation of his home city of Vienna. Now, whenever we think about Beethoven and Napoleon, we always think of the Eroica Symphony. Napoleon was a charismatic leader and he promised sweeping progressive change. So, like most of the European intelligentsia at the time, Beethoven swooned when Napoleon first rose to power. So much so that he gave his Third Symphony the title Bonaparte. But then Napoleon turned out to be just your average, power-hungry, egomaniacal dictator. When Beethoven hears that Napoleon has crowned himself emperor, he famously scratches the name Bonaparte off the score in a rage. And later he retitles it just Eroica, or the Heroic Symphony. Even though it doesn't make the kind of political statement that Beethoven hoped for, you can hear how it makes a powerful musical statement in this performance by the National Philharmonic. And from this point forward, the idea of Napoleon and what he could have been hangs over Beethoven for over a decade. But it's another 5 years before Napoleon actually wreaks havoc in Beethoven's own backyard. In 1809, Austria declares war on France for the 5th time since Napoleon's rise to power, and he has lost patience. He writes, "Austria wants a slap, she shall get it on both cheeks." French armies march toward Vienna, and as they do, the Austrian court flees the city. And that includes Beethoven's favorite student, Archduke Rudolph. Now, Archduke Rudolph was an excellent musician. Beethoven taught him piano and composition, and they seemed to have a mutual respect and affection for each other, which is no small thing for a guy like Beethoven who'd been described as morose, ironical, and misanthropic. As the Duke leaves, Beethoven writes the first movement of what will become known as the Farewell Sonata. Over the top of the first 3 chords, Beethoven writes the word Lebe wohl. It's the German word for goodbye, but it's not just any goodbye, it's a personal goodbye. It's the kind of word you'd use with a friend or family member. And he uses those 3 long chords, Lebe wohl, through the entire first movement. And because it's so simple and so distinct, you can always hear that word Lebe wohl, no matter how many other things are happening around it. So this personal goodbye to the Archduke is threaded through the entire first movement. And back in Vienna, Beethoven is huddled in his brother's basement with a pillow over his head while French armies bomb the city. Austria surrenders and French troops occupy Vienna. Beethoven writes, "We have passed through a great deal of misery. I have brought little into the world that is connected, only here and there a fragment. The whole course of events has affected me body and soul." Now, the second movement of the Farewell Sonata is called The Absence, and it is a musical picture of exactly what he describes in this letter. Sometimes it's anguished, other times it's aimless. You can almost hear him wandering around his apartment, as the music wanders around the keyboard. This goes on for about 9 months, and the Austrian court returns in 1810. So naturally, the last movement of the Farewell Sonata is called The Return. Now, there were actually a lot of musical works written to celebrate this moment because it represented some kind of return to normalcy in Vienna. But the Farewell Sonata is a private expression, not a public one. Beethoven wrote the exact dates of the Archduke's departure and return on the score, and personally delivered it to him when he returned. And you could ask if Beethoven was just sucking up to a wealthy patron, but keep in mind that Beethoven was really socially inept. He didn't flatter people even when it was in his own interest. And in addition to being wildly celebratory, the last movement also has some really tender moments in it. When Beethoven presents the main theme for the last time, he marks it espressivo, and he writes it in such a way that it sounds like that feeling you get when you look at someone and you say, "It is so good to see you again." So, in the midst of this crisis, Beethoven, who notoriously struggled with having relationships with other humans, actually creates this beautiful personal expression of friendship. So, spend some time with the Farewell Sonata, and maybe it will inspire you to find your own creative ways to tell people that you care about them.